Hello and welcome to Makala's Makala Podcast channel. Makala, meaning branches, kaSesotho. My name is Amanda Masondo and I'm your host. We hope this podcast finds a way to impact, educate, and inspire your next. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Buzzsprout. Basically everywhere where you find your podcast fix. Hello and welcome to Makala's podcast channel, Makala. I remain your humble host, Amanda Masondo. Welcome, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, like and subscribe, of course. We are on everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, everywhere where you get your podcast fix. Every first and last Friday of every month. My guest today is, again, not an entrepreneur himself, but an emotional stakeholder in the sector. That's what I'm going to call it, because also me, emotional stakeholder. We want to give you guys the information that you need, all the info that you need to better your businesses and to grow and thrive in your pursuit for greatness. My guest today, Zinhle Mncube. He is from 22 on Sloane, and he is, I must get it right because, promotions. This is his latest title, let me tell you. I'll tell you just now. He's the head of business and partnerships. Welcome, Zinhle.
Thanks so much. And big hello to all your listeners and viewers. I like the fact that you introduce yourself as humble. That's well noted.
Stop.
That's well noted. But anyway, hello. It's nice to be here finally.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You're not going to like this, but where I'm going to start, first things first, is your personal story. Who are you? Who are you? Where were you born and raised? And how did we get here?
Okay. Luckily, I'm not that old, so it can be a brief. Yeah, actually, we are getting old. Okay, so Zinhle is an East Rand Ekurhuleni, born and bred, proudly so. I grew up. I was born Esprit Katlehong in Ngema section. Grew up there for a little bit. Grew up in Rondebelt, which is a small suburb in Germiston, and then folks then moved to Alberton, which is where then a good chunk of my life was. So from a schooling point of view as well, we all throughout within Ekurhuleni, and then for tertiary, I went to UJ, did my undergrad in finance, then went ahead and did my traineeship or graduate program through Standard Bank in their investment banking division. I was there for about 4 years, looking at power and infrastructure and energy. Funny enough, after 4 years, I did make a bit of an attempt at entrepreneurship. And to say that I cut and bled myself in an almost suicidal way is an understatement. But you know what? Those lessons, that journey was very, very necessary in truly forming the ideals that I stand for now. And it's really cool to see some of the things that I was trying to do happening and me trying to do them where I am now and in the various roles that I've been in. So I guess my experience is banking, finance, and then doing some great development work or development economics consulting work for about 4 years, and then getting into impact funding, and then ultimately where I am with Sloane, where I started as an investment associate looking after the accelerator program, working predominantly with tech startups, but then lending myself here and there in other various programs to where I am now. So yeah.
Fantastic. I won't embarrass you and tell people, to find your thesis, and, read up on some of the stuff that you've worked on. We'll move on. I won't do that to you.
Don't, but do at the same time, because that was a lot of work. That was so much work.
So Zinhle
almost didn't happen, but yeah, I'm so glad that it did.
We're here now.
Absolutely.
So banker turned person in who's touching on SME sector things and working so closely with entrepreneurs? How did that come about?
So I think towards the tail end of my time in banking, I think call it a quarter life crisis, but I was really starting to question the impact that I wanted to make. Which, look, it's not a bad thing being idealistic, but I think part of it is that a borderline hubris in that you can actually change the world thing and I want to make an impact. And in that part of it is very good ideals. Part of it is also you being that young and being a glory chaser and wanting your name in the lights as, this guy did this. Yeah. But there was there was a lot of truth in those things that I stood for, in that I believe that, more can be done in shifting and moving the needle both in the country and the continent. Secondly, I'm a firm believer in entrepreneurs being a good part of that solution, a very significant part of that solution, and all the actors around them to enable entrepreneurs to fully thrive and being a catalyst to just economic development in the continent, especially if entrepreneurship is done right in terms of equipping founders, standing behind founders from a financial point of view, and even technically as well. So that's where I guess from the moment I left the bank to where I am now, it's been that narrative where I saw that, yes, we need to assist entrepreneurs. We need to develop communities as well that can earn a livable wage in order to support these entrepreneurs and be the market. But at the same time, I found myself a little frustrated in that we're doing so much good work in trying to develop them, but there's no capital to stand behind it, financial capital, that is. And which is then why I guess I studied what I studied post-grad. I wrote what I wrote in my research paper in the attempt of seeing what can we actually do in alleviating societal welfare using finance and entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Sure. When we talk about some of taking into consideration some of the bottlenecks that are already affecting our economy, I mean, you know them, I won't even touch on them. Based on that, how would you describe the state of entrepreneurship and the state of the SME sector as a whole?
I think when you look at the sector, it's almost like there's two truths happening at the same time. And I think that is a microcosm of our country, where we have so many world-class things, our financial system, there are certain elements of our infrastructure. There is a high skill set in various sectors of our profession that we have. But at the same time, you have the poverty, you have people not being able to survive a week with their wages. You have about 10%, 90% most of the population is earning less than the livable wage. They can't sustain their household. So with the same thing that we're looking at macroeconomically, it's true with the micros that are happening within SMEs, in that we've got very strong and capable entrepreneurs. We've got highly promising ideas that are going around, but at the same time, they just can't seem in a lot of respects to break through. Look, entrepreneurship is high risk. The failure rates, we see them, they from first year all the way through it really is nothing short of a miracle for a business started from scratch to survive year 5. Those are just the cold facts. But in some respects, and even globally so, we take pride in the fact that not everyone can be an entrepreneur, and we have such a high failure rate. But truly, is it something that we can be proud of? No. I think if there are means and mechanisms that can enable entrepreneurship to actually survive and increase the failure rates, or reduce, I beg your pardon, the failure rates, and get them to maybe if 50% of the guys that have started a business by year 5 can still be in existence, we tick off a lot of things as a country. We're able to create jobs in a very meaningful and sustainable way. But then in certain respects as well, when we look at, I've mentioned the high caliber of entrepreneurs that we have, I look at the highly promising ideas that we have a very conservative financial system as well. So, which is very bank led especially within South Africa, and rightly or wrongly so, it means then the type of funding that goes to entrepreneurs means there's a big gap. And when you look at various reports, so I think 2016-17, the funding gap or the funding demand that is being unmet by the financial landscape in South Africa was at around 350 billion for entrepreneurs or SMMEs. When you look at the World Bank, I think this was their study in 2020, they would say that that gap stands between 9% to 15% of our GDP. Yes. Now, our GDP is in the trillions. So you do that math and how big that is. So that could be anywhere between then 500 to 600, 700 billion in the funding gap, according to their estimates. So those are then the various challenges. I think another layer that we should add here is we can't ignore South Africa being, and the rest of the continent being, youth-led as a continent. So there's that. And there is a big need for our youth to be equipped and be skilled. In South Africa, our matric pass rate, yes, we saw 83%. But the true story is when you look at the attrition from the guys that came in from grade 1 to the guys that actually sat down and wrote the paper, there was a more or less 50% attrition. Some of them, maybe they failed, repeated, we'll find them and see them later. Some of them actually did drop out. So looking at Stats SA as well, I kind of like looking at, so I was really, really quite excited to see Stats 2023 come out. So when you look at the number of young people with a matric certificate, or when you look at people that are in a working age population that have a matric, it's not as high as we think. So that means if the minimum of what educational attainment means in South Africa, not a lot of young people, or a lot of young people, but not enough young people have it. That has then a spillover to the kind of entrepreneurs we're going to create in terms of the skill sets that they have. Because when you look at whether you're a tech startup or you're just someone in a spaza shop, there are certain skill sets that you need to have, from just an arithmetic point of view to you then being on the other side having the technological skill set to develop and build out and code out your solution. So we have a big digital skills gap, not just it's digital skills, but also just broadly skill sets in South Africa. So, and the rest of the continent. So those sort of things are the things that limit entrepreneurial success. Because if the man is not able to build what they say they want to build, then it means they need to go externally. Externally can be someone else within the country, or externally being outside the country. And which is where India then, for example, has really milked globally that market in really just churning out these IT sort of skills, and then the world then outsourcing everything to them. That has a detrimental effect in terms of just the knowledge base that sits in a country and what a country can actually do in terms of its own intellectual property. And those things have spillover effects on entrepreneurship.
Yikes. When we talk about load shedding, have we actually quantified the amount of the loss, right? The lack of growth that it inspires, right? How do we have the numbers? Because I feel like it's nice and all to say, load shedding is affecting small businesses and it's affecting, but have we given it actual figures, and can we attribute those figures to the amount of growth that now the economy is poorer for?
We actually can, and I think we can look at it in several ways. So luckily, Eskom's push has just churns out these numbers and these stats, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, there have been more days than not where load shedding has not happened in the past year.
Okay.
When you look at the report that the Minister of Electricity has released, I think he said it is estimated there about 500 to 600,000 jobs have been lost because of load shedding. And this is because of businesses closing down. So when load shedding occurs, there are several things that happen. It's either, as a small business, I can't afford alternative power, so I have to stop and close my business. So that means no customers. That means then my revenue decreases. It means I won't be able to either pay my staff, or I won't be able to pay my rent, or just any of those things. Or I can actually afford the alternative sources of energy, but it comes at a cost. Diesel is expensive. Buying a generator is expensive. Even getting an inverter, solar energy, those upfront costs, they tally up. And then it means then my operational costs of delivering the service during electricity then bumps up. Now, I've got two choices as an entrepreneur to make. I either need to then pass through that cost to my customer, who is also facing inflationary issues as well from an affordability point of view, who is also losing their job. And then affordability then kicks in. They can't then afford your services or your product, then you lose business. So my second point was, so yes, if they then pass through the cost, it results to losing customers. The second point then is they absorb those costs, meaning the price stays the same for that product. That then affects margins, meaning then it puts pressure on how much they have to grow. So they need to grow at a higher level for them to compensate for them losing their profits. So those are then the just those challenges that they're facing. And I think with load shedding, not just load shedding, but just the price of fuel, the price of delivery of goods. When you look at the issue that we have with the ports, railway, all of those things. And I think with some of them, because most of our SMEs are survivalists by nature. So it's highly likely that they do not have a car, they do not have just a place to run their business. So there's certain costs that they face that affects them personally. So if someone needs to stock for goods, hypothetically, they need to either find someone or they need to go on a taxi. All of those things come at a cost. So if you look at that concoction of a perfect storm, it really is amazing to see still so many SMEs pushing through and surviving, because it's almost like you are not even allowed to do well in this environment. How dare you do so well? And it's those ones that really need to be then supported and seen how best they can thrive and flourish in these challenging times.
Sure. So it's actually more meaningful when you do survive. It means more.
It does. It does mean more. It really, really does. And it's just unfortunate though, because we celebrate hardships so much that we fail then to correct the infrastructure that makes things so hard. Entrepreneurship on its own is a difficult thing. Validating your problem, having customers, getting customers, customers liking it, maintaining your customers, that on its own is a very difficult thing. Now, there are certain things that both public and private sector can remove to just ensure that the only thing that entrepreneurs is trying to solve are these things. But now alongside these issues, they now need to deal with these. And I think if you look at it, we can say it's unfair, but life is generally unfair. But there has to be a concerted effort to try to remove certain things to enable entrepreneurs to do well. And just to allow them to solve the hard things that are naturally hard in just being an entrepreneur, not the macroeconomic stuff, not the infrastructure stuff, not the access to internet things. Those things should be resolved in some way or form, not by them, or by them if they find the problem and are able to solve for it. Yeah.
So based on that response, who is an entrepreneur? Who should be an entrepreneur?
I think I'm the wrong person to answer this, and I'll give you my reasons. The reason why I I'm quite hesitant in answering this is because I think as well the term entrepreneurship as well is in a sense overhyped. Overhyped because they are brave in just venturing out, starting their business, and they should be applauded. But it shouldn't be done at the expense of someone who opted not to be an entrepreneur. And it shouldn't be done as if entrepreneurs are coming down of a golden staircase from heaven and they now are the saviors of this world. Entrepreneurs really, at the essence of it, are people that have found an alternative way to solve a problem. And they are looking for commercial means to solve a problem. So in the bare bones of it, for me, that is what an entrepreneur is.
Gotcha.
And there are so many people that believe that, yes, I think you can have a natural knack for entrepreneurship. And sometimes that lends itself in a stereotypical way as someone that is able to sell. And being able to sell is an important skill of being an entrepreneur from a commercial viability point of view in terms of you pushing your product. But you can sell things that people don't necessarily need, but because of you being so good at selling them, people will buy them in any case. So is that entrepreneurship? Maybe it is.
Yeah.
But for me, the heart of entrepreneurship is being able to solve a problem in a commercially viable manner.
Okay. So it's a new year.
Yeah.
Same sector though.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed there. Have you picked up some trends that you think are going to be quite big in this year? And maybe some lessons that you think we need to not forget from the previous year?
So I think so in terms of fundraising, when I look at fundraising in the past year, when you look at tech startups, especially in the continent, globally as well, it was a very, very pressured year. So if you look at how much was raised for the venture capital sector in 2023, it literally was half of 2022. And this was obviously because of macroeconomic pressures, inflation, and all of those things. So, but now what it meant is that investors are scrutinizing their investments a bit more. So investors are holding on to a lot of capital and are trying to be more discerning in terms of the startups that they're looking at. Yes, it's always going to be a risky business. Yes, it's always going to be an asset class that you just need to have the heart for a high failure rate.
Yeah.
But now there is now pressure on, or more scrutiny on, the actual business mechanics of a startup. So it's not just an idea. It's not just an idea maybe that can be sold to a lot of people. It's how then can this problem be solved in a vehicle that has sustainable legs commercially. So I think it's still going to be a relatively tough year, but we'll see if it will be tougher than the year before. But it will still be tough. In South Africa, macroeconomically, IMF, I think this past week has slashed its forecast of growth, which does affect entrepreneurs. And this is mostly because the infrastructure around us is not that great. Referencing what's happening with Eskom still, referencing what's happening with Transnet, referencing all these things that will have an effect on entrepreneurs ultimately as well. So we will see a lot of ventures being born. We will see a lot of even new technology from generative AI, people really trying to immerse and integrate themselves, or those that are technically and technologically able to do that, being then integrated and immersing themselves a bit more with the possibilities of what generative AI will afford them and in running their businesses a bit more efficiently. I think in my view, and this is just a pure sentiment, I think this is going to be 2023 and 2024 will feel like 1 year in terms of the you need a breath there. You need to take a breath.
Use my face. Sure.
So it's going to be one breath of a year in that there aren't a lot of things that are going to shift from what we've seen in the previous year.
Yeah.
You know, when we look at maybe what SARB will do in terms of the repo rate, yes, we're probably, we have seen the worst of it from what economists are saying. We've seen the worst of it. But at the same time, we'll have to keep a close eye of where inflation is. But I think from what we have seen, that there will not be as aggressive of a rate hike cycle as we have seen last year. But it does not mean economic conditions are going to get better. We're going into an election year as a country. There's a bit of heightened political risk that maybe we need to look at. And all of these things, I mentioned these macroeconomic things because they do affect the entrepreneur. They do affect the failure rate. They do affect the kind of policies that we may see. So what is encouraging is that in small pockets, there are a lot of things that are being attempted to truly try and make South Africa and the continent as conducive of an environment as possible. But it feels like it's one of those let's wait and see type of years for us. And this does not mean entrepreneurs should stop building. This does not mean that we should not push for the ecosystem around the entrepreneurs to be more conducive from a financing point of view, technical assistance, business development support, all of those things. I think we just need to almost tighten the support and what that looks like so that the outcomes that we want to achieve are yield productive results, if I can put it that way. So we want our entrepreneurs to think about their business models a bit more harder. We want them to think about their actual target markets because your product is not going to be for everyone. That much we need to
come to terms with. Yeah.
So you then need to then understand if in the best case scenario my business does well, actually how many people or how well can it actually do? Not every business will shoot the lights out. And not every business should in any case. There's a lot of, especially in the tech startup space, there's a lot of emphasis in tech startups needing to be unicorns, meaning their valuation exceeds $1 billion. In Africa, for example, there's less than 10. And to put you in context, the Netherlands has more unicorns there than in the continent.
Okay.
So it's because their macroeconomic environment, their entrepreneurship ecosystem is way more conducive. And in my hope, especially for 2024, when it comes to the continent, is that we actually become more collaborative. Because right now, there's a story that is being sold around us being one big monolith of a continent, thinking that, you can capture everyone in the continent. You can take advantage of the plus billion population. You can take advantage of our youth dividend. But listen, if none of the macroeconomics makes sense, nothing is going to happen. Chad is going to be Chad. Ghana is going to be Ghana. We're still going to be fragmented as an ecosystem and as a country. Or as a continent. So even the country in the various ecosystem, there's a lot of fragmentation between what you see in Joburg and Cape Town and Durban. So even then, we still have a lot of work in really pulling from one side and then bringing it to the continent and trying to see how all of this can be shaped to have one conversation while respecting the nuances, the various different uniqueness that each country has and their challenges, which is without maybe not being humble and plugging the Global Entrepreneurship Congress Plus Africa, which is happening this year in March in Cape Town, which we are organizing as Trinity on Sloane.
Yeah.
That is really our driving thrust, in that we want to connect Africa, and that is our theme for the Congress over the 2 days. In that, look, there's a lot of things that are being said about Africa that we think are yet to be realized.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2023 and even in previous years, those conversations have been happening. But then how can we then concretely take those conversations forward to actually mean something for the continent? And whether you're an investor, an entrepreneur, a policymaker, a minister looking after a portfolio for small business or technology or innovation, or you're in research, what mechanisms, what things, what resources can we all collaborate in, or projects that we can work on that can truly realize Africa's potential, especially for entrepreneurship? And just seeing how best that ecosystem can be rallied around and supported and worked on, so that we truly see the merits of what we have said and what we keep on touting about the potential of entrepreneurship, the things that we see, for example, in our fellow developing countries like China, like India, for example, and how they have really used entrepreneurship and just the development of skills as a tool for really meaningful and sustainable economic growth. Yeah.
At what stage do you think entrepreneurs should be considering knocking on the doors of funders?
Very good question. Very, very good question. And one that is also a bit difficult to answer. So when it comes to funding, I think there's different pots and streams that we should look at. First, it's the kind of funding that you want. Is it grant-based? Is it going to be equity-based? Is it going to be some convertible debt note? Will it be debt, pure debt? Is it going to be asset-backed debt? And then what are the terms that you're looking for? So the type of funding that you need speaks about where you are in terms of your business. If you're in ideation phase, in the harshest sense, you have no business knocking on any door, because what are you knocking on the door for? Have you gone out to validate your idea? Maybe have you sort of tested your hypothesis in a sense with regards to your business and your model? And testing a hypothesis is a simple thing. So you're saying everyone that starts or has a business idea or wants to start a business is starting it off of the basis of certain assumptions. I'm assuming that there are 1,000 people that are struggling with maybe in keeping their sneakers clean, hypothetically, or there are people that are looking for fresh loaves of bread every morning. That's an assumption, and that's a hypothesis. So now with approaching it in that sort of way, then you're going to have to then say, okay, I need to test that hypothesis. Not necessarily building out your business yet, but actually taking the steps to do some desktop research, to do some field research, to ask some questions and things like that. And then only then looking at whether the assumptions that you came in with are true, are better than what you thought, or actually not there. Then if they're not there, kill it. If then you go through then the phases of maybe having gone through your ideation, your hypothesis, and then it's time to maybe sketch out and put together your business, then I think instead of for entrepreneurs, instead of maybe looking for funding, it will probably be best to look for a program. So that's where then the incubators come in, because some of them then they will take you from that ideation phase and help you in building out your minimum viable products, or just your minimum viable service in some instances. But in the absence of that, you build out, once you've tested your hypothesis, you build out your business, have a high level sketch, put it in front of customers, seeing then whether they like it or not. And first prize for entrepreneurs is to grow through your customers. So grow through the more customers you have, securing that one customer, seeing that customer becoming two, that becoming 5, 10, and in that way, if you're able to grow organically in that sense, then great. Then it means then the only time you will need funding is when there's certain growth levers that you need that you do not have the capital for, but you know very well that should those levers be activated, you are going to grow at a very high rate, or at a particular rate that will allow you to afford the funding that you have, whether it's debt or whether it's satisfying your investors that have come in. But there are also opportunities then for, especially in the early stages of entrepreneurship, where a number of corporates through their ESD programs, or just philanthropic family offices and organizations like that offer grants, and those grants don't come with particular terms, and usually that's a great way to grow. Some entrepreneurs grow through even funding competitions as well, where they go pitch, they win, they come in the top 3, they get some money, and then that funds then how they grow. So with tech startups, for example, it does become a bit tricky, because they they have high potential of growing. So they do need, in some instances, capital, financial capital, for them to actually attain those certain growth milestones. The issue, though, is that obviously when you bring in the capital, such as venture capital, there's pressure for you to perform. And for you to perform even in growth rates and timelines that you did not even foresee sometimes. And then that becomes very taxing on those entrepreneurs. So the type of funding that you need depends on the stage that you're in, but it also then depends on how you want to grow as well, and your growth potential, especially when it comes into bringing in equity and convertible debt, or equity based sort of instruments, like safe agreements that we see in in the venture capital space and in the tech space quite predominantly. Within SMEs that are non-tech, the road does become a little more difficult, because their growth potential is not as high or as accelerated or as quick or as rapid as, for example, tech startups, who have an ability, especially if they're digital tech, to grow in a rapid way and get customers quickly, because they have an app, they have so many things that are, I guess, attainable from a market growth point of view, that wouldn't otherwise be available to SMEs that are, by and large, restricted by where their business is. So if you look at a tuck shop, if you look at a retail store and all of those things, they can only grow in as so much as their geography then grows or develops, and things like that, which then limits the kind of growth that you can achieve in certain respects, which then means you can only attract a particular type of funding. So equity is available either with your own funds, with fellow partners, with family and friends, with people that would have a vested interest in the space that you're in. And that's where equity would usually be available. Debt would then be the more immediate one, but with debt, because it would come predominantly from banks, there is that then layer of conservativeness that we spoke about earlier, where then they look about how long have you been operating, what are your assets, and things like that. And there are various mechanisms that sit within the enterprise and supply development space that where there is supply chain, especially if that SME comes into their supply chain, they will offer them some funding, and that funding has some soft terms. So maybe it would be a non-interest loan, or you only pay back, or you don't have to pay back if you meet particular performance milestones as a business, or or it converts into a grant, and things like that, which are available to entrepreneurs that are able to get into those ESD programs. But obviously that is not enough. And even within the banking environment, there's not enough funding to go around according to the demand. And even then, the terms that they offer at times are not conducive for the type of entrepreneur that we have currently. So then it means there's that gap, but then it means entrepreneurs have to go a bit of a long road or some way before they can attract external funding. So they need to make sure that they've been running for a particular time and running well. They've been keeping records of their financials. They have managed to build up maybe some asset base. They've been able to build up a sustainable customer base, and then they can be viewed as optimal for funding. There are opportunities, for example, for purchase order funding. So where you have a contract, you've got with either a corporate or certain municipalities or governments, and you then need to satisfy that purchase order or that procurement opportunity. And then there are a number of organizations and finance houses that fund specifically that. So which is a great opportunity. And those are some great alternative and mechanisms that are out there that are really starting to come on board and come online to just make themselves available for SMEs to get funding. So predominantly, it really depends on where you are, what type of business you're running, and all of those things then will determine which doors are truly for you.
Yeah.
And even so, it does take a bit of knocking a couple of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
22 on Sloane. Talk us through some of the service offering that you guys offer.
Yeah.
If I'm an entrepreneur, what do I get when I walk through the door?
Yeah. So with 22 on Sloane, I think we're quite I think this is my buzzword for us as an organization. We are a comprehensive organization when it comes to who we are and the role that we play in the ecosystem. So 22 on Sloane, the first pillar is us having a very large campus. It's the largest, if not the largest campus for entrepreneurs in the continent. So we house a number of entrepreneurs, and in there they come there. Some just come in just to rent office space at a reduced fee relative to where we are. We're located in Bryanston. So we're solving an issue of bringing credibility to these entrepreneurs when they operate and run their businesses by having a reputable and credible sort of business. Hence our name, 22 on Sloane. So the second pillar then is the programs that we offer. So we run a number of programs on behalf of our corporate partners that will enable them to develop entrepreneurs, develop SMEs, develop tech startups, non-tech. So we put together programs that really focus on capacity building, ensuring that they move along particular milestones. We make sure that they grow in a methodological sort of way, but also not restricting them in a programmatic sort of way. Although in some respects and areas, there is merit for us to grow in a programmatic way. So we run those, we design them, we implement them for the benefit of our corporate partners and the entrepreneurs as well. We have our own in-house sort of programs, which are incubation and accelerator, but ideally we do like bringing in partners because we like seeing the end-to-end value chain in terms of the impact that we have on entrepreneurs. So we bring in the corporate partner to stand behind the program, but we also bring in the corporate partner to be almost an immediate market access linkage for the entrepreneurs that we try to bring. So we've got a whole host of of partners, both public sector, private sector, international organizations. We have an affiliation with the Global Entrepreneurship Network, which is headquartered in Washington, has a presence in more than 130 countries globally, and about 40 has a presence in various levels of capacity in the continent, standing at around 42. And as 20 Sloane, we are the custodian for both South Africa and the rest of the continent, which then has given us an allowance to organize the Global Entrepreneurship Congress plus Africa, which we have previously stated. So that pillar of the Congress falls in our pillar as an ecosystem enabler, where we do try to bring together the ecosystem in various ways, where we we create events that ensure that various parts of the ecosystem are sitting in one place. They're having these conversations, they're having dialogues, they're working together, trying to see what's relevant outcomes there are. Then there's the market access and the capital access that we try to facilitate on behalf of our entrepreneurs through the partnerships and the various relationships that we have. So 20 Sloane is, we offer a full breadth of services as an ecosystem builder, both for South Africa, both for our local region in Johannesburg, but also then for the rest of the continent. And we're just slowly trying to make those strides and seeing best how to harmonize. And I think by collaborating, by working together, by truly putting our hands to the plow, we do believe that we can achieve certain things. I mean, one of our big takeouts in the research work that we've been doing was reflecting on the National Development Plan and how the SMEs and how they were seen as these big job creators. And I think it was standing at, according to that plan, 90% of job creation was going to come through SMEs. In the 10-year review last year, we are falling short, way off of that mark if all things remain the same until 2030. So we've looked at that, we've scrutinized that and said, we can play a part here. We can see how through our various collaborations, through our partners, through the relationships that we have with fellow peers in the ecosystem, how can we realize and turn the curve and turn the corner in maybe making that statement true. We've got maybe a 6 to 7 year runway until 2030. It will be aggressive. It will require a lot of hard work. But how can we make it happen? How can we stand behind the government in realizing this? And how can we make this NDP something that is inculcated not just with 20 Sloane, but everyone that's in South Africa? And then post that, how then can we make sure that all the economic endeavors that each government across the continent has staked or has made a mark on or wants to achieve, how can we make that possible through us working together? So that is who we are as 20 Sloane.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Collaboration. Even this one is a collaboration.
A humble collaboration from a humble host.
All right. Zinhle, let's dream a little bit. All right. In an ideal world, right? The future of entrepreneurship, ideally, what does it look like? What needs to happen for it to be the kind of world that gives us the jobs that we want, gives the economy the boost that it needs? What kind of world? And there's nothing that is off limits. Dream away.
I'm a great daydreamer. So let me give this a go. For me personally, and this is a personal dream of mine, I want to see a fund that stands behind ideas. Because it's in, I think with entrepreneurship, there's so many links and chinks in the chain that need to exist for entrepreneurship to truly thrive. We need an educated population. We need a well-skilled population. We need alternative means of post-matric education. We need conducive policy. We need a enabling infrastructure, both hard economic infrastructure and even digital infrastructure. So all of these things need to be in place. And then as well, innovation needs to be incentivized. You need to allow people, you need to reward people for thinking big. You need to reward people for being audacious and thinking out of the box. You need to reward people and incentivize people for wanting to try things and wanting to break things. And so a personal dream of mine is to have a fund that does that, because I believe the more ideas that are generated, the more good ones will be generated as well. It sounds simple, but I think it's something that shouldn't be understated. So the more you do something, the more you try something, the more you fail, get better, grow at it, the more of a developed entrepreneur you can be, and the more sound and both creative, both viable, both successful of a problem solver you can be. So I would want to, even in the schools as well, beyond just the having an educated policy, but population, but I would also want to see problem solving. And I think for me, we need more of that rather than teaching people in high school about entrepreneurship. That's a personal view. Because of how I've defined what entrepreneurship is earlier, we then need to start on the bare bones of firstly identifying a problem. From as young as a primary school to a high schooler, teaching them how to identify a problem, but also teaching them how to map out a problem and solving for it is something that is quite understated. And we should teach that a bit more. So much so that when they get to a place that they want to start a business or they become entrepreneurial, they start their entrepreneurship journey on the right foundation, which is what problem is out there that is either, if it is being solved, it's not being solved well, or it's not being solved at all. And how can I solve for that? And not only that, have I been equipped enough through the education system, through my own learning, through my own curiosity to be able to solve for it? So if we are then able to create this groundswell of people that are able to identify and attempt to solve for problems, we can generate good ideas. We can create various labs that can make attempts at solving for problems. And this can be true in across just even academia, the research, because we need South Africa is very low in terms of its research and development and the spend that it puts, both in terms of corporate, in our academia, and just in a number of facets of our societal fabric. So we then need to change that. And that's why I go back to incentivizing innovation, incentivizing idea generation. Because if people can see that there is a future in me trying to solve for a problem, we're going to come out with better entrepreneurs. And we're not going to only just come out with better entrepreneurs, we're going to come out with better professionals, better civil servants, better politicians, and just a better society that looks at things with a glass half full. And this is not just a spiel on positivity and optimism. No, this is you finding productive means in the problems that you see around you.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. At the tail end of our chat, let's summarize.
Yeah.
If you would give me 3 points in the conversation that we've met, if the entrepreneurs remember nothing else, 3 things that you think are paramount importance for either their growth, their ability to scale up, whatever that you think they may need, what are the 3 things that you would say, do not forget this?
I would say, first and foremost, and I think this is something that I've been just mulling over and I'm hoping to one day write about it. Think about your operating environment, not just your customer. Look at the space and just the macroeconomics that your customer and just your entire life of a business is operating under. Think about what the inflation may do. Think about what the rate hike can do. Yes, you're not borrowing, but someone is borrowing, that's your customer. But such as service providers that you are trying to use may be borrowing. That may affect certain things in terms of you being able to offer your service in a way that is attainable for the people that you're trying to do. So think about that. Think about where you're operating and don't just think about it, think thoroughly about that. And there's so many resources that can assist with that. So use those resources. See where, for example, things like, because we have such a mature, compared to the rest of the continent, a mature financial system and a securities exchange. Think about what those movements mean for you as a business. And think about, for example, your continents as well, and the various things and movements that are happening there. The second thing that I would implore is don't be lazy when thinking about your business model. And with that, I mean, how you're going to make money with your idea or with your product or with your service. Don't and I think I see this quite often in there's always going to be a particular model. And look, I will concede that there are a set number of business models that one can try out and attempt at in terms of how the business can make money. But really think about it with regards to the value that you want to bring to your customer and how that value translates to the customer and how then they pay for it or how they are willing to pay for it. Because a customer can say, yes, we like your service, but that process of them liking it to paying for it is not a short distance. And that requires you to then think about their psyche and the things that they're willing to pay for and the things that they're not willing to pay for. The third thing that I would probably say to entrepreneurs is, don't be a hero. I think in our current climate and just culturally so, we like these solo journeys. We like the idea of making it by yourself with no one's help. We like the idea of being self-made when there's no one that is self-made. We look at examples that are unrealistic. We look at examples that are anomalies and not the norm. And more often than not, as an entrepreneur, wonderful, brave, and great as you are, you will probably most likely fall under the norm. So collaborate as much as you can. Scrutinize the people that you work with, but pursue collaboration, pursue partnerships. There are certain things that you don't need to go through. There are certain things that you don't need to suffer through that a partner can enable. And have patience with yourself. this road is very, very long. So don't be a hero. I think and I think that comes with, and coming from experience, it comes from wanting to be a glory chaser and at times overstating your importance. You're only as important as the customer that you're servicing. If there is no customer behind your idea of a problem that you're trying to solve, you are you're nothing. You're nowhere. Not you as a person, but you as in this role as an entrepreneur, because it means that you're not solving any problem. You're not shifting any needle. You're not improving anyone's life through your existence as an entrepreneur. So always have that sober view of yourself.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Zinhle Mncube of 22 on Sloane. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.